in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. A few things we're going to dive into. The first thing we will be getting into is Syria and U.S. and Russia and where we're going to go with that. We're also going to get into a little bit of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg. One thing that's going to tie into the first topic with Syria is also going to be the raid on Trump's lawyers. So we'll get into that too. And I'm going to kind of have to figure out where I want to go after that. I have so many little topics that I would like to cover, but we'll get into that. And there's some really kind of weird things going on that kind of with the whole raid. It's, you know, going in there for the Stormy Daniels, and then they're like, well, it has to do with the other tape of them on the bus, you know, and then, you know, WikiLeaks, and it bounces around a lot. It's real kind of hard to get your hands around what they were pinpointing, but I really question whether they had something they were pinpointing. I think they had kind of a broad, well, you know, let's go after this, and this. If we cover these three things, maybe within one of those we'll find something. And I'm going to get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. When it comes to the WikiLeaks, you know, they're always trying to tie Russia and WikiLeaks together. And then with WikiLeaks releasing Podesta emails just after that tape was released, of Trump saying that about, you know, grabbing women's, you know, area. It's almost looking like that's where they're headed. And then you have this potential false flag, which many are calling it a false flag in Syria. this is all going to kind of tie together. I'm going to actually play 2 Ron Paul Liberty reports, but the first one is actually the last one that was put out. And this is covering, will this raid lead to Trump attacking Syria? So let's go ahead and dive into this one first.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, our co-host. Daniel, good to see you this morning.
How are you this morning, Dr. Paul?
Well, I'm doing well, and we're going to continue our discussion on Syria. It's a little bit different right now because what's happened since we talked yesterday is that there was a little old raid going on by the Attorney General in New York and went through the private papers of Trump's personal attorney. Well, you're not supposed to do that, but there's exceptions, and they got a search warrant, so it's okay. But Trump is very unhappy about this, which then raises the question of what we talked about yesterday. You know, Trump has already threatened he's going to do something in Syria, and if this is as significant as they say it is, Trump just might use that, for the distraction. The interesting thing to me, though, is everything seems to be in chaos. I guess we must be seeing things with blinders on, because when things get chaotic, usually markets crash. And, of course, right now, all I see in the markets, they go up and they go down. Today, as we do the program, the stock market is up 500 points. So they're not worried about this. They're not worried about the Trump administration. They're not worried about the destruction of the attorney-client relationship. I think that's the big news. And the second one is whether or not this is going to prompt the opening of some real hot war. And, of course, it's been reported that our Navy's moving in that direction with a significant amount of power. So, and the Russians have already said, don't get too close, and you didn't warn us. You didn't follow protocol. You're supposed to tell us when you bring these warships this close. You haven't done it. So that's stirring up. But it's something that I think is going to have the potential of exploding just any minute. So we'll have to wait and see. I don't know whether there's anything else up Trump's sleeve that he might do, but right now the most logical thing, if he's looking for distraction and get people to rally around the flag, it's going to be dealing with Syria, because everybody knows that Assad has to go, and everybody knows the Russians are guilty of everything.
Dr. Paul, but I thought this whole thing was supposed to be an investigation into whether the Trump campaign colluded with Russians to help get him elected. And now it's all about raiding his lawyer's house, looking for payoffs to prostitutes and that sort of thing. Isn't it a huge stretch?
Well, I guess they're used to doing this. I mean, you ever think about some of that legislation we saw pass? Then when it gets into the administrative branch and into the regulatory branch, it's totally distorted and made so much bigger. So I guess this is what happens here. And it's been done before. I think even the investigation under Clinton, extended further along than Whitewater, the scandal with the housing. But yes, I think this is dangerous. My opinion about this attorney-client relationship is pretty important. And if it's marginal, if it's borderline, it can go either way. Well, he might be a bad attorney. We have to do it. I say we should always err on the side of safety and the protection of personal liberty, and not assume, well, we have to go on the side of, well, we can't let this guy get away, so we have to do it. But it brought up in my mind about the doctor-patient relationship and the safety you have in doctors talking with their patient. But that was destroyed when they passed this HIPAA law. Yeah. It protect everybody, the patient's privacy. And when you read the detail, what it did, it destroyed the patient's privacy. You had to send out more reports. And there's not much privacy in medicine. that's why this will have ramifications. If they're able to do that, somebody will use this as a test case. Oh, well, we are suspecting that the attorney might have done something like this, so therefore there is no such thing as attorney-client, relationship.
What's interesting is Alan Dershowitz, the famed attorney. He's been known as a solid liberal. He's apparently a Clinton voter, and that sort of thing. But he's come out on the same side as you have. He's very concerned about the client-lawyer privilege that's been apparently violated by this.
Yeah, and I think that was. I like what he's doing because he was painted, and we put him in one corner. He's written a recent book. He's defended Trump on technicalities, not because he's a Republican now. Sort of thing. So no, I think he's a very credible person. But I don't know whether it was he that said it, but something about if this would have been done to Clinton, the civil libertarians that have been out really checking this out. So they pick and choose, and the whole thing is. The media is on the side of destroying Trump, and this one could be very serious. But I have no idea what's up Trump's sleeve. And once again, although we anticipate a lot of this, not exactly this incident, but that Trump's getting ready to do something. He probably didn't even need this, but this is going to help him. The trip he had scheduled for South America, he canceled that, and he put the vice president in charge of that and take care of it. He has to be the commander-in-chief and direct these military forces and direct the Navy and know what's going on in this war in Syria. Well, why doesn't he call us up and ask us for our advice? Just bring him home. Let's quit this. Let's get out of the way.
Yeah, he has. He skipped to the summit of the Americas. He said to focus on Syria, which isn't a good sign. You can be sure that his neocon advisors are whispering in his ear, Mr. President, this is how you can divert attention from this. There's no question about it. But, we like to give unsolicited advice to the president on this. But, there's someone else who, I know our show is getting very popular, but he's got even more viewers. But he gave some unsolicited advice yesterday. And we have a tweet that's sort of related to what he said. But, this is Tucker Carlson, who has done a terrific job. The 7 minutes of his monologue last night are historic, went totally viral. He may have single-handedly stop the war if one doesn't happen because of it. But here's what he tweeted. Okay, assume Assad used chlorine gas. Is it worth starting a war? Overthrowing Assad results in chaos. Thousands die. We might see genocide of one of the last Christian communities in the Mideast. Does it make us safer? Region more stable? How'd regime change in Iraq and Libya end up? Very good question. So he's saying, in his monologue, which was terrific, he said, I don't buy it. I'm very skeptical. But he's saying, okay, so what if he did? A couple of people died. It's terrible if that's what even everything he says is true, but thousands are going to die in retaliation for a few people dying in this?
When they were debating going into war against Iraq in there, I remember asking one of the neocons who was there presenting the case for it. I said, well, what if it doesn't go well? How much are you willing to spend? How many years will you stay? How many lives will you give up? If we were in a year and it's a total failure and we've lost 5,000 people, and I went through these statistics, what would you do? I tried to pin them down, of course. There wasn't one consideration. Even I said, well, what if you're there 5 years? Who would have ever believed we'd be there 15 years? But there was never anything that they would say, well, maybe we should think, well, maybe this is turning out to be a Vietnam, and maybe we should be more cautious. No, this was a different story, and they could handle it. And the other thing that hasn't been mentioned is enough in this little debate going on with Syria, and it should have been even months ago. Where does this authority come from? Why does the president have this authority? I don't think the president should have this much authority on trade bargaining. Trade is supposed to be a function of the Congress. But we have allowed our presidents to go to war. And, of course, when they tried to slow the president down on going to war, they passed the War Powers Resolution after Vietnam. And all it did was it made it easier for them to go to war. They say, he might say, well, we don't have troops on the ground. We just have special forces in there, a couple thousand. And, they go on. And then besides, we don't have to do anything for 60 days. We can be there protecting our country and our Constitution. We don't have to have any restraints. So the efforts to slow this down actually backfired on them. So why don't they use the Constitution? That's what I say. You can't go to war without a declaration. But that is so old-fashioned that maybe Assad will get here before we can stop it. We won't have enough time to declare war. And Saddam Hussein, was about ready to bomb us and that stuff. And people just roll over on this. And, of course, you have to put a lot of blame on the media.
Yeah.
So it's great to hear somebody like Tucker come up and put a little bit different perspective on a station that generally doesn't do that. So he's doing a great job in exposing the truth about what's happening.
Absolutely. And so here's the scene as we started the show. The USS Donald Cook is steaming toward Tartus in Syria, which is a Russian naval base. Apparently they're within 100 kilometers, which is close. The Russians, as you pointed out, have reportedly protest because they have not filed beforehand to let them know. There are reports that Russian planes have buzzed the ship or looking around. There are other reports that Russians are jamming some of the drones, the radar for the drones, the U.S. drones over Syria. Just before we lit up the show, there was word that the Organization for the Prevention of Chemical Weapons has agreed to send a mission to Duma where this attack apparently reportedly took place to do some investigating, which I think is would be a positive sign depending on the makeup of the group. But, we know that so first of all, this place fell. The rebels were bussed out earlier, a few hours ago. All the jihadists were bussed out of this place that apparently supposedly was attacked. And so now it's been secured by the Syrian government. The Red Crescent was in there. The Russians were in there. They couldn't find any signs of an attack, at least according to press reports. Nobody in the hospital being treated for chemical attack. The locals that they've interviewed said they had no idea what they were talking about. And here's another interesting thing, because the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, this is the source that has always been mentioned. If anything about Syria from 2011 on, it's always been this group that they've quoted. All of a sudden, this group is not quoted, because what they reported is that 21 civilians died as a result of suffocation caused by shelling, which collapsed the basement. This is what they reported. And no one's reporting it now because it doesn't fit the narrative. All of a sudden, they were the good guys because they were kind of pro-rebel. So what we're left with is the White Helmets reporting. That's the only reporting founded by a British spook, funded by the U.S. and UK government. Very, very shady organization. They've been proven in the past to falsify claims of chemical weapon attacks. And this is what everything rests on.
This incident with the Skripals essentially has been disproven. But they have no remorse. They have no conscience, because it only takes them a week that they quit talking about it and they go on to something else, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
Oh, the Russians did it, the Russians did it. And everybody says, and even Trump does it, the assumption of total guilt. It's absolutely proven. He doesn't bring it up. They don't dare use the word alleged, like most of the television companies. When there's a murder or something, they still say alleged when it's domestic. But here, nothing is alleged. It's absolutely true. Turns out, and you've read this same report, which makes it easy for me to believe, with a little bit of medical background, that the Skripals might have suffered from food poisoning. That would explain that much more than that poison gas, because there's no way they could have been exposed to the gas that they claimed that they were.
And just lived and been fine for a few hours, gone off to a pub and everything, and then all of a sudden falls sick. Yeah, it is amazing how you're not hearing anything about this anymore. Apparently, Yulia Skripal was released from the hospital, at least, and maybe her father as well. They're doing fine, although the pets were all killed.
But they've hustled them off. The little report I heard today is, they're kept in secret. Nobody's allowed to interview them or check them out or anything. But of course, now who knows who would like to kill them?
Yeah, that's scary.
Because even if the whole thing was fake, they did it, and people are going to be very angry about it. The people they were trying to punish, which were the Syrians, Assad, and the Russians, and everybody else. So those were serious things that they've done.
Yeah, I actually watch this. I don't usually do this, but I watched live the, believe it or not, the Russian ambassador to the UN Security Council gave a briefing yesterday, as did Nikki Haley, our own illustrious ambassador to the UN, about this. And it was interesting to hear them talk past each other. But the Russian ambassador, I think what stood out, he said he had a couple of good zingers, but which are true. And everywhere you've gone, you've left chaos in the wake. You should stop intervening in these places. But he also made it very clear, I think, that the Russians are taking this very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just close by, again, we had kind of a warning yesterday. Everyone that I've seen said that the White House switchboard was very difficult to get through. I definitely would call the representatives. I would call the White House, make it known, do whatever you can, because by the end of the day today, the president may just, hey, John, what should I do? Bomb him. Bombs away. So I'm making it sort of light of it, but it is very, very serious, very stressful. We have to do whatever we can to stop this horrible, horrible, unconscionable potential act by the president.
Boy, I have to agree with your urging to contact the White House, because the one thing is, I think he has to do something. Trump has to do something now. He's committed to doing something. Last go around, he dropped some bombs on the runway and didn't kill a lot of people. I think some people were killed. But now he says he's going to do something really, really big. Well, maybe if he hears more from the people, that he may tone it down and do a lot less, and it'll be less dangerous. Just remember when Obama threatened to do this bombing, he at least took a little bit of time and it was in the public and it was debated, and then he was going to take it and get permission from the Congress. So that is old-fashioned. That's way back, ancient, all the way back to Obama. They actually going to ask the Congress. By that time, there were enough people that lobbied Congress, and they wouldn't vote for it, and he had to give up on it. And, of course, the neocon said, well, that was the mistake he made. He should have this authority, and he should have done it. Just totally ignore the Congress. And that's also the reason why we get involved in all these places, because what we're doing is so unconstitutional, so dangerous, and it's still, I've said this many times, that it really bugs me when you hear about people praising the military and coming to me and say, thank you, Ron, for your military service, because you help protect our liberties and you help protect our Constitution. I would like to think that I've contributed a little bit since I've been out of the military and contributing something to this program that may have brought attention to our freedoms, our liberties, and our Constitution. But believe me, those troops over in Syria, and if Trump goes ahead and bombs, he is not protecting our liberties. He is not protecting our Constitution. He is not protecting our safety. He's not saving a nickel. It's dangerous. And the American people, I think, when they have the facts, they know this, and they would concede that what we best ought to do is to at least listen to what is this non-intervention stuff all about? Well, it's really complicated. It's mind your own business. You do that with your next door neighbor and you get along pretty well. You don't go in their house and tell them what to do and encroach on their property. So I'll tell you what, if you follow that, mind our own business, you're a non-interventionist, because it doesn't make any sense, which means that you have to resist the temptation to listen to the demagogues who are the warmongers and the war profiteers, because when you listen to them, then you say, well, I guess they're right. They're really in charge, so we better do it. There is some danger, and we have to give up a little bit of our freedoms for our safety. Well, you don't. You never have to give up your liberty for your safety, and that has been, embedded in our mentality since the 9/11, and it's absolutely wrong. You don't have to give up liberty, because the more free you are, the safer you'll be, and the more prosperous you'll be, and the greatest amount of peace that you can achieve will be in a free society that gives up on interventionism. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. That's the first one we're going to play. I do want to get into the raid itself. And then I'm going to get into where I believe this to be a false flag. And we'll cover why Ron Paul believes it to be a false flag. We'll get into that. But I want to get into the raid first for you to get a complete picture on what's going on here. Now, I have an article here. It's from Reason.com. Check them out, Reason.com. Feds raid office of Trump lawyer who paid off Stormy Daniels. This is a big deal. The very big news of the day, FBI agents raid the law office of Michael Cohen, president Donald Trump's lawyer, who was involved in payment of $130,000 to adult performer Stormy Daniels for a non-disclosure agreement. Some reports suggest they also raided his home. Recently, I've been listening to the podcast Slow Burn about Watergate. There's a fascinating theme throughout it. When you're living a historical event, how do you know? How can you tell when a development is a big deal? This is a big deal. It's very early on, but there's something we can already tell. According to Cohen's own lawyer, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, widely regarded within itself as being the most important and prestigious U.S. Attorney's Office in the country, secured the search warrants for the FBI based on a referral from Robert Mueller's office. Assuming this report is correct, that means that a very mainstream U.S. Attorney's Office, not just Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office, thought that there was enough for a search warrant here. Moreover, it's not just that the office thought that there was enough for a search warrant. They thought there was enough for a search warrant of an attorney's office for that attorney's client communications. That's a very fraught and extraordinary move that requires multiple levels of authorization within the Department of Justice. The U.S. Attorney's Manual at Section 913 320 contains the relevant policies and procedures that highlights the feds are only supposed to raid a law firm if less intrusive measures won't work. As the USAM puts it, in order to avoid impinging on valid attorney-client relationships, prosecutors are expected to take the least intrusive approach consistent with vigorous and effective law enforcement. When evidence is sought from an attorney actively engaged in the practice of law, consideration should be given to obtaining information from other sources or through the use of a subpoena, unless such efforts could compromise the criminal investigation or prosecution or could result in the obstruction of or destruction of evidence or would otherwise be ineffective. Such a search requires high-level approval. The USAM requires such a search warrant to be approved by the U.S. Attorney, the head of office, a presidential appointee, and requires consultation with the Criminal Division of the U.S. Department of Justice. This is not a couple of rogue UASAs sneaking in a warrant. Such a warrant requires an elaborate review process. The basic rule is that the government may not deliberately seize or review attorney-client communications. The USAM and relevant case law therefore require the feds to set up a review process. The process might involve a judge reviewing the materials to separate out what is privileged or what might fall within an exception to the privilege, or else set up a dirty team that does the review but is insulated from the clean team running the investigation. Another option is a special master, an experienced and qualified third-party attorney to do the review. Sometimes the reviewing team will only be identifying and protecting privileged material. Sometimes the reviewing team will be preparing to seek or to implement a court ruling that the documents are not privileged. Robert Mueller is aggressive on this sort of thing. He already sought and obtained a court ruling that some of the Paul Manafort's communications with his lawyers were not privileged because they were undertaken for the purpose of fraud, the so-called crime fraud exception to the attorney-client privilege. 3 magistrate judges signed off on this. Federal magistrate judges appointed by local district judges, not by the president, review search warrant applications. A magistrate judge therefore reviewed this application and found probable cause. That is, probable cause to believe that the subject premises, Cohen's office, contains specific evidence of a specific federal crime. Now, magistrate judges sometimes are a little too rubber stampy for my taste. I was just about to say that. I'm like, don't they just send a stamp, whatever? Notably, recall the time that a magistrate judge signed off on a truly ludicrous gag order forbidding Reason from revealing that it had been served with a subpoena for information identifying commenters. But here, where the magistrate judge knew that this would become one of the most scrutinized search warrant applications ever, and because the nature of the warrant of an attorney's office is unusual, you can expect the magistrate judge felt pretty confident that there was enough there. I want to say if the judge is left and very political and anti-Trump, the left believes there's something there. Even without evidence that there is something there, they completely 100% believe there is something there. So I don't know this judge, so I can't say they are, but I'm just saying if they are, it wouldn't really be enough, I don't think. Number 4, the search warrant application. The lengthy narrative from the FBI agent settling for the evidence is almost certainly still under seal, and even Michael Cohen doesn't get to see it yet. But the FBI would have left the warrant itself, and that shows, 1, the federal criminal statutes they were investigating, and 2, the list of terms they wanted to seize, or not terms, but items they wanted to seize. Much can be learned for those, assuming Michael Cohen doesn't release it. Watch for it to be leaked. Again, this is a big deal. It's early times. Watch for the search warrant itself. That will show us what crimes they are investigating and what documents they think are probative of that crime. Watch also what Michael Cohen's lawyers do in the struggle to compel arbitration with Stormy Daniels in a federal court in Los Angeles. The search warrant dramatically complicates whether Cohen can or should submit to any questions in that case. Be skeptical of the surge of misinformation and inaccurate legal takes that are certain to drop. But watch, this is historic. And again, that was at reason.com. Now, again, I look at how the judges tend to stamp things, and then if you got an anti-Trumper, I really don't think that it would take much to convince them. There's enough evidence, I believe, that, we'll find something. And go ahead and stamp the search warrant. And then, with all this going on, Trump is caged in. And then you have this supposed gas attack in Syria. And with what's going on with this investigation, everything that, is surrounding Trump, Russia, he can't try to talk to Russia the way he would probably do if none of this was going on. There would probably be talks to somehow figure out or allow, inspectors in to see, well, now we have the, inspectors that are supposed to be heading there to, try to figure out where this gas came from. I'm not a big Russia proponent. I'm not a big, yay, Russia. There might be a few things that Russia has done that I like, but I wouldn't want to live there. I don't think most Americans would want to live in Russia either, even if it had a nicer climate. It's far from America, even though America is heading the direction of closer, more like the Soviet Union, other socialist, nationalist type fallacy utopias. When you look at what's going on here, I think that we have basically a want to go into Syria for a long time. Trump, I don't think under normal circumstances would probably go in, but now he's cornered. Russia's supporting Assad, and the narrative is it was Assad that, committed the gas attack, even though we found out before that, you might want to look at the so-called white hats that tend not to be what they're portrayed as. Whether, there are the good groups of white hats, there's a lot of white hats that have been suspected of the ones that are committing these attacks and then going in and filming it all. They tend to be right there every single time. And it's almost too convenient. And they've been linked to radical groups within Syria. So they're not who they seem to be. Basically, it comes out looking like a false flag to, we have Trump in a corner. He's going to have to attack. That's what I think. I think Trump's trying to give Russia and even Assad I'm going to have to strike, but get the hell out of the way. So I can, drop the missiles, go, look, I struck. Kind of like he did before. Something that, Ron Paul was talking about. But really, back to it being a false flag, what have we seen in Syria with these past gas attacks, and what are the facts? Let me go ahead and play. I was going to play one, but I'm going to go ahead and redirect you guys to one from Ron Paul, titled "Another False Flag: Will Trump Escalate in Syria?" And this kind of goes into basically what we've seen in the past, and then it even talks a little bit about Turkey and Iraq and how these groups that are the people you don't want on your team. If we go after Assad, those are the groups that we're going to help. Those are the groups that seem to be involved in a lot of misinformation and propaganda in Syria. But there's a new Ron Paul Liberty report out that I really need to get to about this. And that's titled Trump's Madness in His March to War. So let's go ahead and get into this.
You see that guy?
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report for this special update on Syria. We were delayed a little bit this morning on our routine program due to technical problems, but we wanted to get with you on the serious activity going on in Syria. So I want to thank you for tuning in. Daniel McAdams, our co-host, is with us. Daniel, welcome to the program today.
Happy afternoon, Dr. Paul.
Okay. And, you know, the subject, of course, is Syria and what's going on and trying to figure out what our president's doing. I might suggest the title of this is Trump's Madness and His March to War, because it just seems like that for 1 minute, and the next minute we're not sure what he's talking about. One minute he wants to bring the troops home, and then the next time he's going to blow up the world. But the first thing I ran into this morning that said that this thing's going to go on was a tweet by Trump. And it's not exactly a soft tweet. He says, Russia vows to shoot down any and all missiles fired at Syria. Get ready, Russia, because they will be coming, nice and new and smart. You shouldn't be partners with a gas-killing animal who kills his people and enjoys it. Same old, this is propaganda. And I keep thinking, why in the world are we doing this? Why are we looking for this fight? The other thought that crossed my mind, Daniel, on this issue was what happened way back in October of 1962, which affected the world political system and it affected my personal life. And that was during the missile crisis of Cuba. And I was trying to get my residencies done in medicine. And yet the episode of the Cuban crisis came up. And behold, it wasn't too long after that I was drafted, ended up in the military for 5 years. And, of course, my life was changed because I was stationed in Texas, and I'm still in Texas. So events can change things. But we don't know how this is going to play out. But the more Daniel and I have looked at this, the more we realize this is potentially very, very dangerous when you think of the amount of weaponry lining up, against each other. And the one thing that I noticed that is quite different from October 1962, we were worried about an offensive attack on us by the Soviets. Today, I have to sadly say that we're not on defense anymore. We're on the offense. We're too far away from home, and we're threatening people. We have too many troops, and we have all those problems. But it's quite a bit different back then in 62, although we had an imperfect foreign policy, really in many ways, by the Soviets putting missiles in Cuba, put us on the defense. But there's a lot of talk of what's going on, a lot of politics going on, a lot of people who would like to impeach Clinton and impeach Trump, and I just am very concerned. And Daniel's been keeping up a whole lot on all these UN resolutions because it looks like the Russians would have liked to tone this down, but it looks like our side has been able to handle that quite well. And the UN has been absolutely no help, which is not too much of a surprise, but they at least made an attempt. But Daniel, tell us a little bit about how those votes went.
Well, one of the things before, I just follow up on what you said about an early tweet, because that very aggressive tweet that you mentioned was followed up just minutes later with another tweet from President Trump, where he says, our relationship with Russia is worse now than it's ever been, and that includes the Cold War. There's no reason for this. Russia needs to help with their economy, needs us to help with their economy, something that would be very easy to do. And we all need nations to work together, stop the arms race. So it's literally within 5 minutes, he has a war, threatens Russia with war, and then he has a conciliatory. So that's one of the reasons people are shaking their heads, because he's literally doing a 180-degree turn within 5 minutes. So this must be unprecedented in history, Dr. Paul, to have this kind of a president.
Oh yeah. And and it's all on so much on hearsay about all the criminality going on. We just went through this Skripal episode, and there's no proof whatsoever that they were poisoned. And there's been this suggestion, which seems to be attractive to my way of thinking. They might have just had a bad case of food poisoning. And right now, there's people now in the know who's been around are saying they have no proof of this recent accusation that there's been more gassing and massive killings, and there's been people over there that are a little bit more credible and saying they can't find the evidence. And of course, if Russia and Syria wants to bring in some people and get to the truth of this, all they do is get roadblocks in it. What is amazing to me is how delusional people can be and how they can join in almost all of NATO joining in, and they're ready to go to war, and they don't have evidence of anything. And it's just it's mind-boggling to think of this. I mean, they're not dealing with a full deck of cards from my viewpoint. So I think that it'd be nice to know what Trump is really up to, but we can't really outguess him. The one thing is no matter what he says and does, doesn't seem to matter, because if you look at the weaponry out there, and Daniel mentioned it, there's weapons all over the place, and they don't like it to go unused, and accidents can happen, and already some of the accusations on gassing, they're well may be all false flags. So these false flags and accidents are much more prone to happen with the amount of military force facing each other and the maneuvering of navies and all of these things, and everybody's lining up the ducks. So I kept hoping that maybe we're too much of alarmists and maybe it's not so bad, but it's dangerous. And hopefully maybe 2 weeks we'll say, well, why were we so worried? But right now, the country, the world has a right to be concerned to try to sort this out. And I wish that the American people would very energetically, send some messages to Washington to say, back off. We don't need to be over 6,000 miles away from our home just looking for a fight and looking for a war.
Well, it is very dangerous, Dr. Paul, and it's dangerous for some very specific reasons, and I don't think we are overreacting. And I'll tell you a couple of them. First of all, there was the interview of the Russian ambassador to Lebanon yesterday, and he was interviewed on Al-Manor, a television station, which is a Hezbollah station, itself significant, and he reiterated in no uncertain terms that if Syria is attacked by a foreign power, not only will those missiles be shot down, but Russia will shoot down the source of those missiles. And so that would be the U.S. aircraft, and that would also be the USS Donald Cook if they come from there and wherever else. So very explicitly earlier today he said that Russia would respond in that way. The other thing is we're looking at military movements on the ground. All throughout the day, the Syrian Air Force has deployed its resources onto Russian air bases, hoping for protection being on the Russian bases in Syria. I just was looking at a tweet from the Russian embassy in Canada that Russian MPs, military police officers, are being stationed in the Syrian parliament. That's sending a clear message that if you start attacking non-military targets in Syria, you will be killing Russian soldiers directly. And the other thing is that the Russians have taken their military vessels out of port in Syria. Now, you cannot attack if you're in port. So their ships are out to sea now and facing U.S. ships in the eastern Mediterranean. So if you just look at movements and objective things on the ground, both sides are preparing for war.
All right. And I guess we shouldn't be shocked that lies have been told in the past and continue to be told. When you think just back a short time in history, Just think how many lies have been told. First off, the time I was involved in the military in the 60s with Vietnam, that was all based on lie and lied into that war and how many Americans died there, nearly 60,000. And then they keep talking about another reason why we have to stop Russian aggression is what they did in Ukraine. And when you study that, you find out that we were very much involved in the coup that precipitated the crisis. And it was the lies that we told there, and they continue to tell that. And what about Iraq? This is recent history. Most everybody thinks nobody could defend Iraq, and yet the guy that did so much promotion of that war, Bolton, he's in the administration now. And then Libya, that was based on a lie. Republicans complained about that. But when the Republicans do the lying, the Democrats like demagogue a bit. But here we are in Syria, based on lies, and I cannot see how anything productive can come from lies. I always think that progress in society is based on seeking the truth and trying to get people to understand it.
Well, as you suggested earlier, Dr. Paul, there's a very, very real possibility that there was never a chemical attack in the first place, that the entire thing was staged. There was a tweet earlier today from a BBC producer where he posted some photographs of how young children's bodies were being placed by white helmets into positions where they were photographed in much more emotional things. And the BBC obviously is on board with the British government, which is all gung-ho pro-war. But the other thing, let's not even just take the Russians who were there. The Syrian army has retaken the Duha, which is where the attack took place. And the Russians are there, and they said they have not detected any chemicals. They went to the hospital. No one's being treated for chemical exposure. And even the locals there said they had, nothing has happened in this town. But let's not even listen to them. Let's listen to Mattis himself, the defense secretary, who said just a couple of hours ago, we are, quote, we are still assessing the intelligence ourselves and our allies. We're still working on this. So even Mattis is admitting, and remember, Mattis just a couple of months ago said, we have never been able to determine that the Syrian government has used gas. So here he's saying today, even though Trump said we're going to bomb, he said as late as just an hour ago, well, we're still looking at the intelligence on this. So that's pretty remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Well, the administration's claiming they're putting their coalition together. I was a little bit surprised of the enthusiasm the French have for this, but they're involved, and Great Britain, that's not a surprise. They've been doing this all along, and they've been buddies with the neocons here and with the Bushes. And also, it shouldn't surprise anybody that Israel's very much interested in what's going on, and they're in a battle over Syria, mainly because of their determination to confront Iran. And then you have Saudi Arabia, who for many, many decades, when we guaranteed their safety and security as long as they gave us their oil at discount, everything seemed to be okay. But that's seeming to change right now. They're using their military forces, and we've been helping them, in their constant war in Yemen. To think that even they should have enough on their plate that this just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's contagious. This delusional obsession on looking for a fight is contagious, but it still blows my mind to see some of these so-called grown-up people going along with it without questioning it and without stopping and saying, why don't we check it out? I think, if you look at some of the things that Russia, why don't we just wait and see? Why don't we investigate it? They had a resolution. Why don't we investigate it? Why is that so horrible? But the atmosphere is not good, and it's hard to say what will happen because Trump is unpredictable. But like you indicated, Daniel, there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's not total control on what's going to happen with this military.
Well, we have an article up on the Ron Paul Institute website that I encourage everyone to read. It's an expert that I follow for years. He's a retired Indian ambassador, and he put forth the possibility that the Israelis may be behind the false flag because, they flipped their lids when Trump announced that he wanted to get us out of Syria. The first person to call him was Netanyahu and started chewing him out. So there's certainly a possibility there. But, funny you mentioned the French because Macron just said, the French president just said, we promise we're not going to target anything, only the chemical weapons facilities in Syria if we get involved, of which there are none. They've already been decided that they have none. But who else is really enthused about this, Dr. Paul, is Theresa May, who's got a big scandal on her lap. She flew off the handle with the Skripal case. She and Boris Johnson, her foreign minister, outright lied about the Russians being involved in it, and now she's facing a huge backlash in the UK. She's desperate to start dropping some bombs on Syria to change the subject.
In the tradition of Blair, I assume, So,
yes, exactly.
Well, Daniel, I think we're going to, take this break now and finish this. Do you have one last comment you might make? And I think both of us can plan to be available in the morning and get our program on at time, which is 11 o'clock on Central Time. So do you want to make one last statement, and then we'll close this?
Yeah, just the final comment is that the press briefing at the White House just finished about a half an hour or so ago, maybe an hour or so ago. And Sarah Saunders, she was asked, are the missiles going to start flying? And she said the president has not made any final decision. Josh Rogan, a neocon at the Washington Post, immediately tweeted out, what the heck is going on? He's backtracking. So the neocons are furious. So there's a possibility, a tiny one, that the president may be wavering. All throughout the internet today, people have been talking about calling the White House, calling the representative, demanding that they not go to war with Syria. I would say it's critical to keep doing that, do it in a polite but forceful way.
Okay, and I might just add, it's amazing that the only possible opposition to this might come within the administration from neocons that were all appointed by Trump. And he's excited because he's getting more and more of them in his cabinet as his advisors. And then he comes up with this flip-flopping. But I've said it before, I keep wondering whether it's just that he doesn't understand what he's doing, or he does this purposely to keep people off balance, or what the story is. But nevertheless, whatever it is, I cannot see, even from his viewpoint, how can this person maintain credibility, with this sort of thing? But the other one that we didn't mention today, but is always a possibility, and that is to have something going on in foreign affairs when a president gets into trouble domestically at home. So that, of course, and ironically, some of these times when you look at the invasion of the Trump attorney, I so often come across very sympathetic to the president, because I think this Russiagate and all this collusion stuff is so distracting and so minor compared to this preparation for war. So I'll tell you, I want to thank our viewers for tuning in today for this audio report, and we'll be back on our regular programming in the morning. Thanks for listening.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe as long as they're still there on YouTube. Who knows who YouTube's going to go after? They've already silenced and basically, in a way, stole revenue away from a lot of, citizen journalists, alternative media outlets. And they've decided that they are now the arbiter of, whose voice, which, people say it's a platform. It's a platform. Well, they put it out there as a free platform that, everybody could have a voice. Then they kind of made it into a thing where, hey, look, everybody can have a voice, and if you're good at it, you can make money at it. And then they go, well, I don't like what he's saying, so we're going to no longer allow him to make money. You got to realize, too, when they do that, those people might already still have money sitting there in YouTube. They might have just had 1 million views or even, 100,000 views on maybe multiple videos. That money disappears. They don't get a collect on it, even though those ads already showed on their video. So the service had actually already been transacted. That video was shown, the commercial was shown before the video, and then you go, well, we're not going to pay you because we don't like what you said. And I think YouTube has used themselves as a middleman in between well, I don't think, I know they've used themselves as the middleman between the person that's basically advertising and that, advertiser. So they come in and go, well, we created the platform, we give it to you for free, so we're going to take, part of this profit. Okay, cool. But what happens when they go, well, we don't like what you said, so we're not giving you your share of something that already transacted? I think there's a case for lawsuits there, maybe. But back to this, it's really teetering on the break of war. And the problem is the situation they put Trump in. And that's why, to me, it really tends to look more like a false flag to me. Like, we've been wanting to do this. Now we got Trump in a situation where when Russia, bolsters up, are you going back down to Russia? While you're having this Russiagate, BS going on. See, I'm not even a Trump supporter. It's pretty bad when it gets so bad that people that don't support a lot of things that Trump does or says have to somewhat stick up for him. That's how bad the left has gotten. Because if he goes to war, that's one issue. Or if he strikes Syria, that's one issue that I want to do. But then when you look at the box they put him in, you don't make it where I'm looking at him making this as a decision where Rushgate doesn't exist. Where lines of communication can be a little bit more freely open. But again, they create this situation where, he doesn't really have a lot of options because of how they're going to make this look. And then, there was a Quinnipiac poll that most Republicans say Trump should not be fired. And this, I believe, has to do with the optics of it. Again, it's really about the optics. What happens if he tried to fire Mueller? He's trying to suppress the investigation. That's all it will be. You won't be able to get out of that hole. But at the same time, again, look at what this is doing to the ability for him to make certain decisions without basically putting his presidency on the line. And you best believe that he's looking at that. said 55% of Republicans think that President Donald Trump should not fire Special Counsel Robert Mueller, according to a Quinnipiac poll released Tuesday. More than twice the 22% of Republican respondents who thought that Trump should fire Mueller. When it came to all American voters polled, regardless of party, the number were even more stark, 69% against Mueller's firing and only 13% for it. The poll results suggested that even Republicans who think that the investigation is unfair still think that Trump should not fire Mueller. 52% of Americans and 30% of Republicans think that Mueller is conducting a fair investigation, while 32% of Americans and 54% of Republicans think the investigation is unfair. Tim Malloy, assistant director of the Quinnipiac University poll, released a statement along with the results that said when it came to Mueller, voters' opinions were clear. American voters in huge numbers, including a majority of Republicans, tell President Donald Trump, keep your hands off Special Counsel Robert Mueller. What else did the poll say? The Quinnipiac poll was not all bad news for Trump. It also showed that his approval rate had risen to 41%, his highest rating since a similar Quinnipiac poll gave him 41% approval rating in March 2017. Trump's highest approval rating came for his handling of the economy. On the issue, 47% approved while 48% disapproved of the job he'd done. Taxes came in a close second with 46% approving and 47% disapproving. Trump received lower marks when it came to foreign policy, with only 39% approving of how he handled foreign policy compared to 55% disapproving. When it came to questions about Stormy Daniels, voters believed the affair happened 58% to 14%, but overwhelmingly did not care about it. 73% said they did not think the affair was an important issue, while only 23% thought it was important. On no issue were the numbers more clearly divided along party lines than when it came to views on journalism, according to Quinnipiac. Republicans say 80 to 12% that journalists make up stories. Democrats back journalists 89 to 6%. And independent voters are divided, as 46% say journalists report excuse me, to the best of their knowledge, and 43% say they make up stories. The university surveyed 1,181 voters nationwide for this poll. Voters were called on cell phones or landlines between April 6th through the 9th. And you can find that at theblaze.com under Quinnipiac poll. Most Republicans say Trump should not fire Mueller. Okay, give me a second here. Now I have an article here from Reason.com. Ben Sass asked Mark Zuckerberg whether he defines hate speech like college students do. for me. I'll be okay. One of the most interesting moments of yesterday's Senate committee hearings on Facebook privacy issues came when Senator Ben Sasse, Republican from Nebraska, asked Mark Zuckerberg to define hate speech. Zuckerberg immediately suggested violent speech as a category of content that would always be impermissible on Facebook, but Sasse cut him off. Everybody agrees about violent speech, he said. What about psychological harm? Here's the transcript of the exchange with especially noteworthy sentences bolded. Sasse, I think regulation over time will have a hard challenge. You're a private company, so you can make policies that may be less than First Amendment full spirit embracing. In my view, but I worry about that. I worry about a world where when you go from violent groups to hate speech in a hurry. In one of your responses to one of the opening questions, you may decide, or Facebook may decide, it needs to police a whole bunch of speech. That I think America might be better off not having policed by one company that has a really big and powerful platform. Can you define hate speech? Zuckerberg. Senator, I think that this is a really hard question, and I think that's one of the reasons that we struggle with it. There are certain definitions that we have around calling for violence. So let's just agree on that. If someone is calling for violence, that shouldn't be there. I'm worried about the psychological categories around speech. You used language of safety and protection earlier. We see this happening on college campuses all across the country. It's dangerous. 40% of Americans under age 35 tell pollsters they think the First Amendment is dangerous because you might use your freedom to say something that hurts someone else's feelings. Guess what? There are some really passionately held views about the abortion issue on this panel today. Can you imagine a world where you might decide that pro-lifers are prohibited from speaking about their abortion views on your platform? Zuckerberg, I certainly would not want that to be the case. Sass, but it might really be unsettling to people who have had an abortion to have an open debate about that. Zuckerberg, it might be, but I don't think that would fit any of the definitions of what we have. But I do generally agree with the point that you're making, which is that we are able to technologically shift toward, especially having AI proactively look at content. I think that's going to create massive questions for society about what kinds of obligations we want to require companies to fulfill. And I do think that's a question that we need to struggle with as a country, because I know other countries are, and they are putting laws in place, and America needs to figure out a set of principles that we want American companies to operate under. Sass, I wouldn't want you to leave here today thinking there's a unified view in the Congress that you should be moving toward policing more and more speech. I think violence has no place on your platform. Sex traffickers and human traffickers have no place on your platform. But vigorous debates, adults need to engage in vigorous debates. I'm not sure precisely which poll Sass was referencing, but 53% of students told the Knight Foundation that diversity and inclusion were more important than free speech. YouGov found that 58% of students supported banning intolerant and offensive ideas, and half of all students who currently said that hate speech is currently protected by the First Amendment, nevertheless, opt in that it should not be. Current students were more likely than other groups to say offensive speech should be restricted, according to Cato Institute, and News Citrion found that 21% of people 30 and younger thought the First Amendment was outdated and should be changed. 72% said faculty members who make offensive statements should be disciplined. The data are clearly in line with Sass's assertions. A significant percentage of young people are suspicious of the First Amendment, define hate speech broadly, and prioritize comfort and safety over free speech. Sass was also correct to note that Facebook is a private company and is therefore not bound to adhere to the First Amendment. Zuckerberg would be within his rights to create a platform where speech is regulated more strictly than it would be on a public university campus. Zuckerberg, to his credit, maintained that he does not wish to banish uncomfortable conversations from Facebook, though he conceded that the company may not always do a good job differentiating uncomfortable speech from so-called hate speech. That job is only going to get more difficult. This basically is where we're headed. And we can only hope that the even younger generation, along with us and the older generation, as long as they're around, can hold off this little slither of, I like to call it the post 9/11 kids that did not grow up pre 9/11. They were too either real young, can't remember it, or weren't born yet. And then it kind of goes up to this real young generation that my generation and a little bit older generations are the parents of, that are going, that's not cool. That's not cool. So this younger generation is kind of actually growing up going, yeah, those people are nut jobs. And I'm only hoping that will basically help stop a dismantling of our society where rights are no longer, even acknowledged. Okay, give me another second here. So slow down all of a sudden. It'll do that. And it definitely does not want to play today. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and go to this clip, and I'll get this other browser relaunched here. I want to cover this one from We Are Change, because if you really look at a big picture of the world and all the issues we're facing right now, is there any chance that we, just as people trying to be free, what are we able to do outside of government? What are we able to do when it comes to rebuilding our own towns, rebuilding. There's a story that was about a group, two guys basically out in Indianapolis. Started off with one guy, then it turned into two guys, but they go around filling potholes. When the city doesn't allocate enough money to fix the roads entirely, they crumble. I lived in Indianapolis for a while. I always like to say your typical Democratic ran city. You look at it, and really they like projects, but they don't like to take the funds and spend them what they were actually meant for. Instead of taking the funds that were meant to maintain the roads, they come up with these, crazy ideas, get these crazy engineers to come up with these ideas, dump a crap load of money in a few projects, and then go, we need to raise taxes because the roads are just falling apart. We need more money. Don't understand why. It's just going to take so much more. Well, you spent that much money. That could have fixed, a lot of it. Even if you did need more, you didn't need that much more. But again, it's one of those deals where people just doing what needs done. They take donations, but, they go out, buy the asphalt, go around and fix potholes all throughout the city. Two people. One pothole at a time. So we definitely can do more. This clip here from We Are Change. I have to try to dodge these commercials in it. But cryptocurrencies are literally rebuilding entire cities. So I want to get into this. So let's go ahead.
That are here in Miami, Florida at the Bitcoin conference. And if you want to buy a Ferrari or whatever the hell this car is, it's just 48 Bitcoins here. Now, very interestingly, the Bitcoin community is filled with a number of characters. Some of them are greedy Wall Street buttholes. Some of them are angry nerds, but a large portion of them actually do care about decentralization, freedom, liberty, and being able to help other people around them. One of those people is, of course, Danny Sessions, who has been using cryptocurrencies to really do some incredible work, a lot of fundraising, a lot of crowdsourcing, a lot of people just coming together in this kind of crypto community and doing the right thing. Something that we're going to talk about now, and something that we even may participate very closely in the near future. So, Danny, just first of all, tell us what have you been up to? How has the whole crypto world changed the whole kind of charity game that has been happening within our own community?
Well, we got started at the first Bitcoin conference that you attended. We were running different charities with that, and that was pretty basic and simple. But as I moved on, and with the radio show we've been doing for 4 years, now that Dash sponsors us, we were able to work that into our sponsorship. So we were able to come up with a great idea of how we can do good things for people and use that as positive press. And that's a currency for Dash, of course, because they're getting positive press. But for me, it's awesome because I get to do cool shit and have fun and, feel good about what we're doing and actually do something positive. Because, a lot of this, a lot of what you see in the libertarian community and stuff is a lot of talk and not really a lot of people doing anything. So, it's great to build cells and do all these different things to have groups. But if the group's not doing anything, what's the purpose?
Very good point. And I think we're going to be doing more work with Danny because he really tapped into this kind of cryptocurrency community. And there's a lot of resources. We just need to utilize those resources in manpower. We have an audience. The audience, we could do a lot of amazing things right now. So we're going to be talking to Danny about personally working together in the near future. So what happens is, this is my understanding of it. Correct me if I'm wrong. Dash, every month when they create this cryptocurrency, they have about 5% left over that they give to someone that the miners want to have the money. Again, this is all confusing. I'm trying to simplify it as much as I can because there's a lot of complicated nerd mumbo jumbo. But cryptocurrencies are made, Dash is being made. Once a month, they decide where 5% of that money goes. The community decides where it goes. Correct? And then you've been going on there and being like, well, we just had an earthquake in Mexico. The people here need help. Let's fundraise. Let's get this 5% and let's go help them out.
Yeah. Well, it's actually 10% of the entire block reward is dedicated to not just this type of cause, but all the development, everything that the development team needs to do. So basically, if you have a good idea and you think that it brings value to the Dash network, you would submit that idea. But keep in mind, it's going to cost you $5,000 to submit this idea. This is an anti-spam mechanism. So come up with a good idea and definitely come and try it. Our radio show is sponsored, so a certain portion of our radio show, that advertising is actually paid for by Dash. Well, just advertising some commercials I didn't think was a great impact. So I do extracurricular things like build houses for the homeless. I go to hurricanes and help give care packages to people who just lost everything. So it's been very interesting and very fun to do. Before that, I actually was traveling around the country. I traveled 10,000 miles to cannabis dispensaries to talk to cannabis dispensary owners about using cryptocurrency. So it's, think of a great idea that would take the technology forward and submit your idea. And there you have it.
Tell us about some of the work you've been doing, because I know you've been jumping all around hurricanes, earthquakes. It's like you're the darker kind of Anderson Cooper. You're working on the way here. You're like, I'm there. But instead of spreading lies and disinformation and propaganda like Anderson Cooper does with his intelligence agencies connected, I'm going off tangents. I'm sorry. You're going there and being like, hey, let's use cryptocurrencies. Here we have some money. We have some resources. We're using it. Tell us about the work that you've been doing, specifically like numbers, details, where you've been, the impact you've been able to have with Dash and this cryptocurrency.
So the way it started off, actually, our last proposal was, like I said, driving around. Our last proposal was, like I said, driving around to cannabis dispensaries. Another portion of that proposal was to feed the homeless, to imitate what Jason King has done with Unsung. And we actually did it under the banner of Unsung. In fact, last year at this very conference, we fed several hundred people. We set up tables right here, made a bunch of meals, and went out here in Miami and fed a bunch of the homeless people. And then the hurricane happened, and I had this funding left over for feeding the homeless. And I decided, hey, well, these people are homeless too, and maybe this is actually a group of people that may be more interested in. I mean, they haven't checked out of life or anything like that. They could possibly use cryptocurrency in the future. So we spent almost a month down on the coast in Houston, in the Houston area. We actually hit 12 cities, and we helped 3,100 people with care packages. We made them in our motorhome and went directly to the place, made lines, and handed this stuff directly to the people. So, you've seen all these things going on with the Red Cross, wasting money, throwing stuff away. Well, we were able to mitigate all of that by handing it directly to the people that needed it. So that went so well that when it came time to renew the proposal, I thought that going to Mexico and helping with the earthquake would be a great idea. And as a side effect, we're also working on remittance. So I'm installing ATMs in the U.S., and I've got a special coupon code for immigrants to actually send money home. And now I'm reaching out on the Mexican side by building communities, and I'm rebuilding houses in people's communities. We're going to work on a community center, rebuilding that. So this is kind of catching the eye of the people and realizing that, hey, this is a valuable asset that we should probably be using. Yeah. And so my goal is not just to rebuild houses, but also to rebuild or build remittance channels. And one of the sales pitches that we actually use on this, and this is great, is, Trump. Trump wants to build the wall, and he wants Mexico to pay for it. One of the ways that he wants Mexico to pay for this wall is tacking on fees to Western Union and MoneyGram and all these others, right? Well, if you can use cryptocurrency and not have any fee whatsoever other than what it costs for you to buy it, well, then you're not contributing to the wall. So, it's a no-brainer.
So Danny's going to be out there doing what he always does, helping the community, building homes, helping individuals on the ground. And if you want to get involved, I think a great thing would be is every time you do something, send it out to me. I'll send it out to you guys on either this YouTube channel or my Twitter account. And I could even give you access to just my Twitter account, and you just tweet out every time you're out doing something in the community. Because we have the resources. We just need the manpower to make amazing, magical, beautiful things happen and to be the change that we want to see in this world. Right. So
we're not asking for donations. We're funded, but we would love for people to donate time, get involved, just imitate what we're doing. Do it yourself. Like, when we were doing the Unsung thing, we didn't want donations. We wanted people to start their own Facebook groups and their own unsung chapters in whatever cities. And there's several of them popped up in Seattle and in Orange County, all over the U.S.
Let's do it with a darker-skinned Anderson Cooper. This is Okadowski of WeAreChange.org. We're going to be hitting all. Danny has an RV. He's going to be driving all around. I think we're going to do a lot more work together on the ground, locally. The resources, the money, the funding, the technology is there. All we need is you. And we can do anything. I think we may even do a dash proposal. We're going to talk about that. Why not? I love you guys. If you thought this video was helpful or interesting and you want to help spread the word and you want to help get involved, share this video with your friends and family members. Let me know what kind of projects you think we should get into in the comment section below. And, of course, subscribe. Stay tuned for more here on youtube.com/WeAreChange. Love you guys.
Luke Radowski, We Are Change, WeAreChange.org, and We Are Change on YouTube again, as long as they last. You know how YouTube is anymore. And still been having problems with this damn browser. But I do have something come up here in a minute. I think it's everybody gets off work and First thing they do is say, let's go. Jump on the internet. I've seen this article, and I want to talk about that clip real quick. People are skeptical of cryptocurrencies, but it's really, it's a thing now. Whether you believe in it, you like it, it's a thing. It's not just disappearing. Everybody thought once the .com bubble busted, that's the end of the internet as we know it. Well, the internet changed, but it wasn't the end. It's actually, if you remember the internet back then, not too many options. Well, now it's pretty interactive. It could go a lot farther, I think, but it's definitely not the pixelated internet, of the 90s. Even though I wonder sometimes about the speed. Don't worry, that's my end running so many machines at one time. But I've seen this at theblaze.com. Former Obama aide apologizes for classless insult against Rand Paul. Former Obama official Tommy Vietor apologized Wednesday for tweeting an insult against Senator Rand Paul and referenced the injury he received from assault by a neighbor. Here's what he said. Vector responded to a tweet from Rand Paul revealing that that FBI agents Peter, I don't ever know how to pronounce this. We'll just say Strozak and Lisa Page still held top secret clearances despite their highly publicized text messages criticizing and mocking President Trump. Quote, breaking FBI agents admits that real Donald Trump haters still have top secret security clearances, which allows them to access sensitive private information, Paul tweeted, with images of the letter he sent to the FBI and the response he received. Vietor, who worked as national security spokesman under the Obama administration, used the occasion to attack and mock the senator. You are a shameless hack and an idiot, Vector said. Stop attacking public servants. Start doing a better job not getting beat up by your neighbor, he added. Paul was attacked from behind by his neighbor, who tackled the senator while he was mowing his lawn and broke 6 of his ribs. He is facing federal charges for the assault. Many on the right thought the insult was disrespectful and discourteous, and the screenshots of the tweet was passed around on social media. He later decided to delete the tweet and apologize, but stuck to the substance of its criticism, which was ironically to attack a public servant. I shouldn't have made fun of you getting assaulted by your neighbor, he tweeted. It was classless, and I apologize. But I do think it's hackish and pathetic that you continue to attack these officials for purely partisan reasons, he added. Stop doing Trump's bidding. I hate him so much. Vector has been a vehement critic of Trump. In a recent podcast, Vector attacked the president for his comments about a caravan of migrants headed through Mexico seeking asylum, and said, this is why I hate him so much. When he pounds on the people who have it the worst, he reveals his true character. Vector became infamous in conservative circles for his dismissive comment in 2014 when pressed by Brett Baer on Fox News about Benghazi. Quote, dude, this was like 2 years ago, he said, about 4 Americans being killed by terrorists. Dude, it is the thing that everybody's talking about. Baer interjected back to him. And isn't that really kind of reminiscent of a lot of what the left is doing right now? They attack the president, they attack conservatives, they attack Christians, they attack gun owners, and basically say, you know, we're all bullies, we're all, you know, the problem, and most of the time we're sitting back. You know, most of these people aren't going out and attacking anyone. They're not rioting in the streets. They're not going, you know, we'll burn down the city if you don't get rid of all abortion clinics. You know, you don't see the right out doing that. But they're demonized as the ones that create that type of atmosphere. And they're called the bullies. But what side's being bullied out of revenue for their work that they put in? Conservatives and libertarians. Independent journalists. People on the right were getting kicked off YouTube for talking about a school shooting, even though they weren't even, these people weren't going, oh, I don't know if it was real, or they weren't, you know, saying anything about that. They're going, you know, this tragic, you know, hearts go out, you know, or there, you know, there's this group out there, you know, trying to, you know, make sure funerals are paid, or, you know, or we should fundraise, you know, or all that shut down. If it came from the right, shut down. And they would cite crazy reasons. But the left could talk about it. Jimmy Kimmel gets, you know, #1 trending about it. Very biased on most platforms. Ron Paul supporters seen it back for the 2008, you know, primaries and election. Ron Paul supporters were, you know, blackballed basically across Facebook. They act like this is new, you know. No, we've been talking about it, and we said, you know, oh, it's just the Ron Paul supporters. Well, you know, who cares about those loony people? Because the news said that Ron Paul's loony, so, yeah, those are loony people. When it was actually a very wide political spectrum movement, really. It came from left, middle, right, libertarian, conservative, liberal. It was very broad spectrum, and it was really coming down to, you know, let's create a government that just simply protects and stands up for your right to live your life as you choose. We're so far away from that. 10 years now. 10 years. More like 11 or 12 if, you know, you were there early on. But still, even 10 years, just, it was a lot of college students that came out there. his message was received. I know there were, at times, professors that really disliked him, but they couldn't stop him. It's amazing where we are today. I was just thinking about this earlier today. You know, finally kind of had this moment where I could have just a little peace to myself, which I haven't had for a long time now. But just, I was like, I'm just going to take, you know, good 3-4 hours and relax. Well, because I've been just so bouncing around doing just multiple things lately, I still didn't feel like I could just sit still. So, you know, I jump in the truck and I just go driving, just contemplating. And I was looking at how things have changed so much in 10 years. And there's a cycle of like this 5-year and then that 10-year. 5-year, you go, wow, things are starting to change. Then the next 5 years, oh my, what's happened? And then another 5-year, oh, things are starting to change again. Oh, 10 years, oh, wow, what happened? And when I'm looking at how the news puts out, information, the mainstream media, I should say, not really news, but mainstream media, how they put things out, how the Constitution's viewed, how society has changed. And I again go back to the pre 9/11. I'm like, we have to get back to that pre 9/11 mentality as a society. Now, when it comes to going, well, threats still can come in. Yeah, they can. We should, try the best for, national security when it comes to, attacks from other countries. But we know that we have to worry just as much about crazy terrorists from outside the country as we have to do about crazy people in our country. Believe me, we have enough crazies here too. And the thing is what we have done post 9/11. Has it made you safer? If you look at all the things we've done, has it made society here in America more united? Has it made our foreign policy a better foreign policy? By giving federal government more intrusive powers, especially NSA, the creation of Department of Homeland Security, as it it made our society safer? Has it made you freer? If anything, it's actually diminished the idea of freedom to the point that these kids don't understand freedom. If this is freedom, I don't want it. Because of how society has raised them. How we call ourselves this free society, this constitutional society. When we talk about the Constitution and then talk about democracy, this was not a democracy. This is supposed to be a constitutional republic. As technology helps society, I'd say yes, it's made information, but I think the more I'm looking at it, I'm looking at social media as really not a good thing. You know, if you want to keep in contact with, you know, high school friends and other friends, make phone book or something that you can keep in contact, message each other. But we've made social media more interactive, and you know, that's something I said, you know, was crazy and, you know, great. Well, it's great, I think, if you want an app that's interactive where you can take a picture of your room and add furniture and paint the wall to help you decide on what you want to do instead of having to go down, get paint samples, paint portions of your wall, move things around, and then go, okay, now I know what I want. Yeah, that interactive can be good, but social media has become interactive in the way it's become almost a virtual reality for people. And I was driving the other day, and I was on my way home. It was later in the afternoon. I'm like, you know, this was the time that, you know, school's out and all that. And I'm driving through an area that I drove through, and, you know, I grew up around this area, and I was like, it's like a ghost town. And it was kind of like I was seeing myself back then and seeing myself now. It was like I was having like flashbacks of, you know, people play, you know, the kids playing in yards, the people outside doing things, and, you know, even when it was a little chilly, you'd still have them out in their coats, you know, playing, going, well, at least it's sunny out, you know. At least it's sunny out, I'll go out and play and, you know, do all that. Well, no, not anymore. It was a ghost town. And I was, how's it made it better? Because guess what? Our phones and the internet's gotten more technologically advanced, but, you know, we tend to eat. And, you know, minus, you know, vegan or, you know, for the most part, I'm from the Midwest, you know, we tend to eat the same. We tend to, you know, kind of crave the same things in life, but we're not getting that fulfillment. And it's right there. It's right there in front of us. Because our interaction with each other is through this virtual reality of social media. And it even, I think, divides kids and parents even more, because now that's the only interaction. And, you know, before, when kids would make up slang words, a lot of times they were reminiscent of older slang words that you knew as parents what was being said for the most part. Yeah, there were maybe other parents that weren't quite hip, but for the most part, the slang on social media, like a lot of the terms that we all know, squash, you know what I'm saying, what they mean, but it's already changed. There's already new meanings and new ways to say things, and it gets to the point where our language isn't our language anymore. And I don't know if it's making society better. I think there's positives, but have we gone past taking advantage of the positives of the internet, the positives of the, Facebook or MySpace or, YouTube? Have we gone past those positives, and now, it's kind of like they've drawn you in, and now it's time to mold you to what they want you to become, or exit you from the system. And think, if everybody's on Facebook, if Facebook kicks you off because your viewpoint is bad, well, now you're not in that virtual society no more. Now you're not in the social media virtual world. And you walk outside your house and there's no one out there. Look into how China's starting to give people ratings. And also look at the Black Mirror episode where you get points, and then you're able to get things with your points, but you went down 5 points. You're not eligible for that anymore. Someone said that you were mean. Look at all that and kind of look at where we're going. It's not the best place for freedom. So we really gotta keep our ears and eyes open. And I always say, it goes back to, take control of your family, your kids' education, and really instill some basic principles and morals. That no matter what, live by these. Thank you.